Good evening, and welcome to News of the World. It's Monday, July 20. Tonight, we drift slowly across 28 countries, from Sri Lanka to Denmark. There's nothing you need to do and nowhere you need to be. Settle in and let the world turn. Sri Lanka is moving toward a new government, following the resignation of Rajapaksa. It's a moment shaped by months of pressure. Protests, shortages, a country stretched thin, but it's also a moment of transition, something beginning to settle into a new shape. The Rajapaksa name has loomed over Sri Lankan politics for years, and now that chapter has closed, at least for now. What follows is the quieter work, forming a government, finding footing, tending to the everyday needs of a nation that has been through a great deal. If you've been following from afar, you'll know the troubles didn't arrive overnight. They built slowly, the way trouble often does: economic strain, fuel queues, people waiting, and through all of it, Sri Lankans filled the streets, asking for something better, patient and persistent in a way that stayed dignified even when circumstances did not. Now the country moves forward. A new government will take shape, and with it comes the hope, cautious but real, that the hardest stretch is behind them. There's a long road ahead, there always is, after times like these. But the monsoon rains are falling on the island again, and somewhere in Colombo, people are going about their evenings watching to see what comes next. Norway is counting what a vast fire has taken from it. These past days, flames have torn through communities, destroying more than 100 homes and forcing hundreds of people to leave everything behind. It is being called Norway's largest fire in modern times, a record no one there wanted to set. The numbers carry one kind of weight. More than 100 houses gone, hundreds evacuated. But behind each of those numbers is a doorway that no longer opens, a kitchen that won't gather anyone tonight, a window that used to frame a particular view of trees or fjord or sky. Norway is a country that lives close to its forests and its coast. Most years that proximity is a comfort. This year, the fire moved faster than anyone could reason with it, carried on winds that didn't pause to consider what was in their path. If you're still with me, you might picture what that kind of leaving looks like, not the dramatic kind from films, but the real kind. A few things in a bag, the dog in the back seat. Not knowing what will be standing when you come back. Emergency crews have been working through the nights. Neighbors have taken in neighbors, and somewhere in the quiet after the flames, there's the slow beginning of figuring out what comes next. Not rebuilding yet, just breathing and looking at what remains. China has landed a Long March 10B booster, a step that places it more firmly in the company of nations pursuing reusable rockets. The achievement signals an escalation in what observers have been calling a reusable rocket race. For years, the idea of bringing a booster back to Earth intact belonged mostly to one American company. Now China is making clear it intends to close that gap. The Long March family of rockets has carried much of China's space ambitions for decades: satellites, lunar probes, crewed missions among them. Adding reusability to that lineage matters not only for cost, but for cadence, for how often a nation can reach orbit without building from scratch each time. There's something quietly remarkable about the engineering patience this requires. A booster falling back through the atmosphere must be guided, slowed, and set down gently. The same vehicle that hurled itself skyward now asked to return home as if it had never left. If you're still with me, consider how many small corrections must happen in sequence for that landing to work, each one a quiet negotiation with gravity. China's space program has often moved with long horizons, building toward goals laid out years in advance. This landing fits that pattern, not a sudden leap, but another measured step on a road already mapped. Where that road leads and how quickly others follow remains an open question. For now, a booster came home, and that is worth noting. Bhutan sits high in the Himalayas, a kingdom long known for measuring its wealth in happiness rather than sheer numbers. But these days, the numbers are telling a different story. The country is facing a quiet demographic shift, grappling with a declining birth rate and the steady exodus of its younger generation. It is a familiar challenge for a place that has kept its traditions carefully guarded. Young people looking outward are leaving for opportunities beyond the mountain valleys, seeking education and work in neighboring lands. The families remaining are having fewer children, leaving the kingdom to wonder how to hold on to its future. You can feel the weight of this change in the quiet of places like Paro, where the mountains keep their ancient stillness even as the villages below grow a little quieter. The glaciers in the high peaks are shrinking too, retreating as the world warms, adding another layer of uncertainty to a land already navigating so much transition. Yet there is a deep resilience here, a steady rhythm to life in the highlands. The kingdom has always moved at its own careful pace, and perhaps that patience is what they will lean on now, as they figure out how to keep the hearth warm for the ones who stay, and the ones who might one day return. Lithuania sits on NATO's eastern edge, a small Baltic country that has long kept a watchful eye on its neighborhood. These days, that watchfulness has taken on a new shape: German missiles, arriving as part of a deepening defense partnership between Vilnius and Berlin. For Lithuanians, this is not abstract. The country borders the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad, and the decades of Soviet occupation remain within living memory. Security here is not a theoretical matter. It is something felt in the bones. Germany's military presence in Lithuania has been building steadily, part of a broader NATO commitment to the Baltic states, a reassurance that they would not stand alone if pressure ever came. The missiles are the latest visible sign of that presence, quiet but firm, a statement that the alliance reaches to the farthest corner of its map. If you're still with me, it's worth pausing on what this means for ordinary life. Vilnius, with its old town and cobblestone lanes, carries on as it always has, cafes filling in the morning, church bells marking the hours. Defense news rarely interrupts the rhythm of the day here. But underneath that rhythm, there is steady, deliberate preparation. A small country making sure it is ready, and not alone. Tonight, that readiness carries a German accent, a partnership resting just beneath the surface of a peaceful evening. Jamaica has been thinking about what holds a health system together, and the answer, as it so often does, comes down to people. Deputy Chief Nursing Officer Gillian Mason-Quarry put it plainly: the country will see transformative healthcare only when its nurses are empowered, supported, and properly equipped. It's the kind of statement that sounds simple but carries real weight in a place where nurses have long been the backbone of clinics and hospitals, often doing difficult work with limited resources. If you've spent time in any small island community, you know who people turn to first. It's the nurse at the local clinic. The one who knows the families, who remembers the children's names, who stays late when someone needs stitching up after hours. Mason-Quarry's point is that transformation doesn't begin with a building or a machine, though those matter. It begins with making sure the people already doing the work have what they need to do it well: training, tools, and the authority to lead. There's a quiet confidence in framing it this way. Not a cry for help, but a clear-eyed sense of where the real leverage sits. Jamaica's health future, she's saying, is already standing in the ward. It just needs to be backed properly. And when that happens, the ripple reaches every parish, every community, every family that walks through a clinic door wondering if someone will be there to help. Ivory Coast has spent the last few years watching its landscape shift. Chinese-built mega-projects have risen across the country, large, visible part of daily life now. But these days, the story isn't only about construction. It's about a relationship finding a new shape. China's role in Ivory Coast is changing. That much is clear, even if the details are still settling. What began as big infrastructure delivered from outside is becoming something more nuanced. A partnership where the questions are shifting, where Ivorian voices are increasingly part of the conversation about what comes next. It's worth pausing on, because Ivory Coast has been a significant place for Chinese investment in West Africa. The projects are real, you can see them, walk through them, point them out to a visitor. And when something that visible starts to change, it usually means something deeper is moving underneath. Questions of ownership, of skill, of who holds the plan. If you're still with me, picture Abidjan in the evening light. The buildings stand, the roads hold. But the terms of the next chapter are being written now, slowly, the way important things often are, not in headlines, but in quieter rooms by people who live with what follows. Vietnam has placed US-based Montagnard organizations on its list of terrorist groups, a decision that reaches into the Central Highlands and across the Pacific at once. The Montagnards are the indigenous peoples of those highlands, hill country rising between Vietnam's coast and its borders with Laos and Cambodia. For decades, their relationship with the state has been complicated, shaped by war, by migration, by faith, and by the question of who belongs where. The groups named operate from abroad, among communities that left Vietnam in the difficult years after the war. The designation means Hanoi considers them a threat to public order, and it signals that any connection to them will be treated seriously under Vietnamese law. What makes this worth carrying into the night is not the politics alone. It is the way a country reaches beyond its own borders to manage a conversation it cannot fully contain within them. The Central Highlands are quiet country, coffee farms, mist, small villages that have changed shape many times over, and somewhere in that landscape, the question of belonging remains open, as it does in so many places where a government and a minority people see the same land through different eyes. Zambia is moving toward an election season, and the question in the air is a familiar one. Has the economy improved enough under President Hakainde Hichilema? He came to office promising change, and now voters will weigh what's shifted against what hasn't. The details of that record belong to the people closest to them, in markets, in workplaces, in homes. What's striking from a distance is the tone around the vote. Zambia's Catholic bishops have asked the country to remember its history of peace. They've urged Zambians to reject violence, to carry the campaign with the steadiness that has long set this nation apart. It's a gentle request, but it carries real weight here. Zambia has earned its reputation for calm and quiet resilience. There's something else in the air too, a polio vaccination campaign reaching nearly 4 million children, a reminder that even in a political season, the ordinary work of caring for the youngest goes on. And in Kafue National Park, a new tented safari camp has opened its doors, the kind of investment that speaks to quiet confidence in what this country offers the world. So the campaign will unfold, the debates will come, and Zambians will make their judgment. If you're still with me, it's worth holding the thought that a nation can argue about its future and still hold its peace. Bosnia and Herzegovina sits at a crossroads that has shaped its life for centuries, and these days that shaping shows up in the steady movement of goods across its borders. The Sarajevo Times has been looking at which companies send the most out of the country, and which bring the most in. It's the kind of story that doesn't make much noise, but it tells you something real about how a small economy breathes. Exports are a point of pride here. They're the proof that workshops and factories, some of them quite small, are making things the wider world wants. And imports tell their own story, of what people need and what local industry can't yet supply on its own. What's striking, if you step back, is how much of this trade connects Bosnia and Herzegovina to its neighbors. The flows run through the same valleys and along the same rivers that have always carried people and goods between the Balkans and the rest of Europe. There's no single dramatic headline in any of it, no sudden boom, no crisis. Just the ordinary, persistent work of buying and selling across borders, which is how most countries actually get by, if you think about it. And for a place that has known harder chapters, that steadiness has its own quiet weight. The numbers will shift with the seasons, as they always do. But the trade goes on, and with it, the small daily connections to a wider world. Somalia is working to save something fragile and irreplaceable, the archive of Radio Mogadishu, a station that has carried the country's voice through decades of change. The details are still emerging, but the broad shape of the story is clear. Recordings that hold music, news, poetry, and ordinary broadcasts are fading, and there's a race underway to preserve them before they go quiet. Radio has always mattered deeply in this part of the world. In a country where oral tradition runs strong, where poetry and spoken word have carried history for generations, a radio archive isn't just a collection of old recordings, it's a record of how people spoke to each other, what they sang about, what they feared and hoped for in their own voices at moments now long past. Think of what gets lost when magnetic tape degrades, not just information, but texture. The cadence of a particular newsreader, a song that everyone knew once, a government announcement, a prayer, a weather report, the small sounds of daily life that don't make it into history books. The effort to save this archive is, in a quiet way, an act of holding on, not to the past out of nostalgia, but because a country's memory belongs to its people, and sound is one of the truest ways we remember. Afghanistan has known war for so long that, for many, the sound of it became ordinary. But these days the country is living through something different, not peace exactly, but the strange, uncertain quiet that follows when the guns fall silent, and a movement that fought for power must figure out what to do with it. The reports from inside the country tell their own story, in fragments. Trade through Pakistan has fallen nearly to a stop. Young people leave, sometimes risking everything to cross into Iran, and not all of them arrive. A young man in the east took his own life, amid accounts of economic hardship so deep it has become its own kind of weather. Polio, a disease much of the world has largely forgotten, still finds children here, and the Taliban, who returned to power with a speed that surprised everyone, including perhaps themselves, are learning what every government before them learned: that taking a country is one thing, holding it is another. Conquest is loud and swift. Governing is slow, unglamorous daily work. Budgets and clinics and trade routes, and the patience of people who have very little left to spare. There is no neat resolution to carry from this. Only the quiet acknowledgement that somewhere in the high valleys and crowded cities, ordinary Afghans are carrying on as they have through empires and invasions and long seasons of waiting, with a steadiness that rarely makes the news. St. Kitts and Nevis has been hearing from its prime minister about the capital infrastructure projects steadily taking shape across the two-island nation. The details are still emerging, but the broad picture is one of roads, buildings, and public works moving forward, the kind of slow, unglamorous construction that doesn't make headlines far away, but shapes daily life close to home. For a country of roughly 50,000 people spread across two volcanic islands in the Eastern Caribbean, infrastructure isn't abstract. A new road, a repaired port, a public building brought back to use. These are things neighbors walk past every morning. And when the Prime Minister steps forward to say the work is progressing, it's less an announcement than a kind of accounting. A quiet reassurance that the plans on paper are becoming visible in concrete and steel. There's something else in the air on St. Kitts and Nevis these days too. The country has been enlisting a regional expert to help build a framework for medicinal cannabis banking, a small but significant step, trying to find a place where a new industry can operate safely and within the rules. It's the sort of thing that doesn't draw the world's attention the way passport programs or trade disputes do. But for the people who live here, it's the fabric of the place being woven, thread by thread. And if you're still with me, that may be the quieter story worth carrying into the night, a nation building, carefully, at its own pace. In Benin, there is a bridge that was built to be passed over, a flyover, the kind of concrete infrastructure meant to keep traffic moving above the streets below. But somewhere along the way, the people who live nearby decided it could be something else. These days, that bridge has become a place to linger. Residents have turned it into one of the city's newest attractions, a spot where people come not to cross but to stay. The details are spare, but the idea is simple and rather lovely. A structure meant for transit became a place for gathering. What was supposed to be crossed quickly became somewhere worth slowing down for. There is something quietly remarkable about that. Infrastructure, for all its engineering, is only what people make of it. A bridge can be a route, or it can be a destination. In this case, the people chose the second. If you are still with me, picture the scene as the evening settles, the traffic hums below. Above, on the bridge that was never meant for loitering, people lean against the railings and talk. They take photographs. They watch the city the way you watch a river, as if it might tell them something. It is a small story, in a way. No crisis, no spectacle, just a reminder that the spaces between places can sometimes become places themselves. And tonight in Benin, a bridge that engineers built for speed has become something gentler, a spot where the city pauses and breathes. Syria, these days, is quietly building bridges where for years there were mostly ruins. In Damascus, the Syrian government and Germany have launched a joint reconstruction committee, a small but meaningful step for a country still finding its footing after so much war. Alongside that, the two countries signed an air transport agreement, which means that before long, the skies between Damascus and European cities may carry passengers again, not just headlines. For Syrians who have waited a long time for the world to turn back toward them, this matters. Reconstruction is not a single event. It's a slow, patient thing. Bricks, budgets, and trust, all laid one at a time. Germany's involvement suggests that at least some European governments are willing to engage with Syria's new leadership under al-Shara, who has been reshuffling his security and intelligence apparatus in recent weeks. There is a new intelligence chief, and the architecture of the state is being rearranged. None of this is simple. The region around Syria remains unsettled. There are pipeline discussions with Iraq, tensions involving Iran, and the ever-present question of how Syria's many communities will be treated under those who now hold power. But on this particular evening, the story from Damascus is about two countries sitting down together, signing papers and beginning the long work of repair. If you're still with me, let that image settle for a moment, a committee room in Damascus, and the quiet sound of something being rebuilt. Yemen has known years of fragmentation, and these days the pieces are still shifting. The United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grundberg, has concluded a visit to Riyadh where he urged immediate de-escalation. It is a word that carries real weight here because the country is pulled in several directions at once. The capital, Sana'a, sits under one authority. The internationally recognized government holds elsewhere, and between them, questions of sovereignty, who controls airspace, who decides what may land, remain unsettled. Just recently, the Yemeni government prevented an Iranian plane from landing at Sana'a airport. A single incident, but one that exposed how contested even a runway can be in a divided country. Meanwhile, Yemen's health system is collapsing under the strain of years of war, and governance is fractured across regions. Grundberg's call for de-escalation is not new, but it is persistent. He has been moving between capitals, Amman, Riyadh, trying to keep the door open for dialogue, even when the parties seem far apart. The work is slow and often quiet, but in a place where so much has been disrupted, the act of continuing to meet, to listen, to urge restraint, it still means something. Where it leads depends on people with difficult choices in a country where choices have long been hard. United Arab Emirates has been building something quietly in the desert. Not towers this time, but a place in the world of artificial intelligence. The headlines this week tell of a CIA operative who once spied on the Emirates and, in a strange turn, later helped open a door between Abu Dhabi and Washington in the field of AI. The details are thin, and the full story sits behind closed doors, but the shape of it is worth noticing. For a young federation that turned 50 not long ago, the ambition has always been to matter, to be more than a stopover, more than a skyline. AI is the new ground where nations measure each other. And the Emirates have moved quickly, signing agreements, hosting labs, drawing talent from across continents. That a quiet intelligence channel may have helped smooth the path tells you something about how these things actually work, not in grand announcements, but in long conversations between people who know things other people don't. If you're still with me, it's worth sitting with that for a moment. A spy who becomes a bridge. A country that was watched, now watched closely for different reasons, for what it might build, what it might teach. The desert keeps its secrets, as it always has, but sometimes a little light gets in. Iceland has long lived with warmth beneath its feet, and these days others are noticing. An opinion piece from an Alaskan newspaper has been asking what that state might learn from Iceland's geothermal success, a quiet acknowledgement that this North Atlantic nation has done something worth studying, and it has. For decades, Iceland has drawn heat from the ground to warm its homes, power its industry, and keep the lights on through long, dark winters. It is not a story of spectacle. It is a story of patience, of a country that looked at what the land offered and chose to build around it. The geothermal fields are not glamorous. They are infrastructure, pipes and boreholes and steam rising in cold air. But they have given Iceland something many larger nations still struggle for: energy that is local, steady, and rooted in place. If you're still with me, think of what it means for a place like Alaska, with its own volcanic edges and its own long winters, to look across the sea and see a working example. Not a theory, but a life lived. And in Iceland, that life continues, unhurried, warmed from below, a quiet reminder that the ground beneath us sometimes holds answers we have not yet thought to ask for. The United States has long carried a certain role in the world, not always welcomed, not always steady, but present. These days, something is shifting. Observers note that both Washington and Beijing, for all their rivalry, seem to be stepping back from the kind of global leadership the planet has grown accustomed to. The space left behind is quiet and not entirely safe. The Wire China framed it as a dangerous vacuum. It is a strange thing to picture, two giants circling each other, neither quite filling the room. And it comes at a moment when the world has no shortage of things that need attention. There is grief in the American story right now, too. Iranian strikes have killed 2 United States service members, and there is serious talk of the country teetering towards something wider, something closer to all-out war. Families are receiving the kind of news no one prepares for. That weight sits beneath everything else, and yet the country keeps moving. The World Cup passed through American cities this summer, alongside Mexico and Canada, weeks of matches that ended with Spain and Argentina facing each other at the close. Storefronts closed, competitions played out on courses and in stadiums, the ordinary stuff of a country's life carrying on alongside the harder things. If you are still with me, here is what is worth carrying tonight. Leadership, when it recedes, does not leave a sign on the door. It just gets quieter, and the world notices, not all at once, but slowly, the way you notice a light dimming in another room. Uruguay, the country where the World Cup began, will help welcome it home again. In 1930, this small South American nation hosted the very first tournament and won it, becoming the first name on a trophy that has circled the globe ever since. Now the 2030 World Cup will open on June 8th, and Uruguay will be one of its hosts, sharing that honor with Argentina and Paraguay, Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. For Uruguay, this is more than a logistical detail. Football here isn't just a pastime, it's bound up with the country's sense of itself. To host again, even in a shared role, is to close a circle 100 years wide, 6 nations across 3 continents, and at one edge of it all, the place where the whole thing started. There's a new chapter forming off the pitch as well. Diego Forlán has been appointed Uruguay's manager, stepping in after Marcelo Bielsa's departure. A name many will recognize, a former player now asked to shape what comes next for a team that has always punched above its weight. If you're still with me, picture it, a small country, proud and quiet, preparing to open its doors to the world once more. A century after it first did. Some stories take 100 years to come home. Malaysia has become something of a factory for new public listings in Southeast Asia these days. The exchanges in Kuala Lumpur have been busy drawing companies to offer their shares to the public at a pace that outpaces much of the region. It's a sign of confidence, or at least of appetite. Investors are showing up. Firms are stepping forward. The machinery of the market is turning, but beneath the bustle, there's a quieter question being asked. A listing is a beginning, not an ending. It's one thing to ring the bell, and quite another to build a company that holds its value over years. The concern, as observers frame it, is whether Malaysia can produce not just new entrants, but long-term winners. Companies that grow, companies that endure. It's a familiar tension in fast-developing markets. The excitement of new opportunity meets the patience that real staying power demands. Malaysia has been here before in other forms, balancing ambition with care. The country's biotechnology sector, for instance, is being positioned as a bridge between Asian innovation and global markets. There's a sense of wanting to connect to the wider world on terms that are Malaysia's own. So the story these days isn't just about how many companies step into the light, it's about what happens after. Whether the roots take hold, whether the promise ripens into something lasting. For now, the lights are on, the floor is active, and the question hangs gently in the air. Mauritius, that small island nation in the Indian Ocean, has quietly joined the Artemis Accords, becoming the 70th country to do so. If you're not familiar, the Artemis Accords are a set of principles for space exploration, for how nations agree to behave when they venture beyond Earth. They cover things like peaceful cooperation, transparency, and the responsible use of resources on the moon and beyond. Mauritius is known for many things: its beaches, its sugarcane, its remarkable blend of cultures, but space policy has not historically been among them. And yet there's something fitting about it. An island nation, surrounded by vast ocean, looking outward to an even vaster expanse? The Accords began as a small group, just a handful of signatories, and have grown steadily to include countries from nearly every continent. Mauritius joining means that a voice from the Indian Ocean, from a place that has long sat at the crossroads of trade routes and migrations, now has a seat at the table where humanity's next chapter in space is being shaped. It's a small step in diplomatic terms. But it's a reminder that the conversation about space, about who goes and how and by what rules, belongs to everyone, not just the countries with the biggest rockets. And from an island in the Indian Ocean, that horizon must feel especially close. Poland is building something big, and much of Europe hasn't quite noticed. Plans are taking shape for what could become one of the continent's next great aviation hubs, a mega-hub in the language of runways and connecting flights. It's the kind of project that usually arrives with fanfare. This one has been quieter than that. Think about Europe's map for a moment. The great airports sit mostly in the west: Frankfurt, Paris, Amsterdam. They've had decades to become the crossroads everyone passes through. Poland sits further east, closer to where Western Europe meets something wider. A hub here wouldn't just serve Poles. It would serve everyone moving between west and east, between the European Union and the countries beyond it. The details are still coming into focus, and maybe that's why this has slipped past the wider conversation. No grand opening yet, but the ambition is real, and the geography makes a kind of sense. For a country that's spent recent decades finding its place at the center of Europe rather than at its edge, building a crossroads feels less like reaching for something new and more like stepping into a role that was always waiting. So hold that image, if you're still with me. Runways where there were fields, and the sound of it barely a whisper yet. Dominica has been quietly drawing power from beneath its own soil, and this week, that work showed up in people's electricity bills. DOMLEC, the island's electricity company, says geothermal energy helped bring down the July fuel surcharge to 33 cents. It's the kind of number that might not make headlines far away, but on an island where nearly everything arrives by sea and fuel prices can ripple through every household budget, it matters. Dominica sits on volcanic ground, and for years there's been talk of putting that heat to work, turning steam from deep underground into steady, homegrown electricity. The idea is simple enough in principle, but building it has taken patience, investment, and faith in something that doesn't happen overnight. Now that effort is starting to show. A lower fuel surcharge means less dependence on imported diesel, less exposure to the swings of global oil markets, and a little more breathing room for families and small businesses. There's a longer road ahead, of course. Geothermal projects are complex, and Dominica is still building out what it needs. But the direction is clear, and it's pointing towards something the island can sustain on its own terms. For a place that's been voted the friendliest in the Caribbean, and one that knows what it means to rebuild after storms, there's something fitting about drawing strength from the very ground beneath your feet. A quieter kind of progress, settling in like the evening itself. São Tomé and Príncipe, that small two-island nation off the western coast of Central Africa, has been choosing its president. The polls opened, and by most accounts they ran as they should, steadily, quietly, in the way that small democracies often do. There were some scattered protests, nothing widespread, and they passed without defining the day. The incumbent president was seeking another term, facing challengers who wanted something different. Among them was an independent candidate, Mix João Bonfim, running on a simple promise of change. In a country of fewer than 250,000 people, a presidential race can feel less like a distant spectacle and more like a conversation among neighbors, everyone knowing someone on every side. What stands out is how ordinary it all seems. A nation goes to vote. There are disagreements, a few raised voices here and there, and then the work of counting begins. For listeners unfamiliar with São Tomé and Príncipe, it sits in the Gulf of Guinea, a Portuguese-speaking country of volcanic peaks and cocoa plantations, and it has held competitive elections for decades now. The results are still settling. Whatever comes, the people of these islands have done what democracies do. They've made their quiet mark, and now they wait. Kazakhstan has condemned drone attacks that struck oil tankers along its Black Sea export route, forcing the Caspian Pipeline Consortium to suspend loadings. The pipeline, known widely as CPC, carries Kazakh crude to global markets through a terminal on the Black Sea coast. When drones hit the vessels waiting there, the flow paused. Kazakhstan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement condemning the attacks, a firm, measured response from a country that depends on this corridor for the bulk of its oil exports. For Kazakhstan, the Caspian Pipeline Consortium is not just infrastructure. It's the main artery connecting vast interior oil fields to the world beyond. When it falters, the effects ripple outward to distant buyers and national budgets alike. The attacks targeted vessels, not the pipeline itself, but the result was the same. Loading stopped. The oil kept flowing inland, but at the terminal, it had nowhere to go. Kazakhstan has spent years working to keep its export routes resilient, aware that dependence on a single corridor is a vulnerability. This week showed why that awareness matters. If you're still with me, you might picture that terminal on the coast, the tankers sitting idle where they should be moving, and somewhere far inland, the pumps still turning, waiting for the all-clear. Thailand is looking east these days, toward the travelers who've always come and who, it hopes, will come in even greater numbers. During a visit by Thailand's Prime Minister to China, the Tourism Authority of Thailand signed new partnerships with Chinese companies, agreements aimed at opening wider a door that's never really been closed. China's tourism market is vast, and Thailand has long been one of its favorite destinations. The temples, the coast, the street food that needs no translation. What's striking here is less the announcement itself than the steadiness of the ambition. This is a country that has spent generations learning how to welcome visitors, and now it's refining that welcome, not rebuilding it. The partnerships suggest a confidence that tourism, done with care, remains one of the quiet engines of a nation's life. There's something settled about the approach. No grand claims, no sweeping promises, just an acknowledgement that people will always want to see places beyond their own horizon, and that helping them do so is honest work. If you've ever wandered through Bangkok's Old Quarter at dusk or watched the long-tail boats fold their wakes across the Chao Phraya, you understand why the pull endures. Thailand isn't selling a fantasy. It's inviting people back to something that was already there. And these new agreements, signed far from home, are simply a way of making the invitation a little louder, steady, unhurried, the way a good host always speaks. Denmark has done something quietly remarkable with its teeth. The socialist left, part of the country's governing coalition, has followed through on a promise that might sound small until you sit in the dentist's chair and reach for your wallet: free dental care. In a country already known for wrapping its citizens in a broad social safety net, dental work had remained one of those gaps, a place where the universal promise thinned out and out-of-pocket costs crept in. Now that gap is being closed. If you're still with me, think about what that means in daily life. A parent who doesn't weigh whether a child's toothache can wait. An older person who doesn't postpone a checkup because of the bill. These are the kinds of decisions that shape ordinary weeks, and Denmark has decided they shouldn't turn on money. The socialist left pushed for this, and it arrived not with fanfare, but with the steady rhythm of governance. A policy debated, agreed, and delivered. In a time when plenty of governments talk about care, this one put it into practice. Tooth by tooth, visit by visit. Somewhere in Denmark tonight, someone is sleeping a little easier, knowing that when they need the dentist, the door is open, and the cost is settled before they even sit down. It's a small thing maybe, but small things, well kept, add up to a life held with dignity. And that's the world for tonight. Wherever you are, whatever tomorrow holds, rest easy. The world will keep turning slowly while you sleep, and we'll take another quiet trip around it tomorrow night. Good night.